Tom Fitton is the president of Judicial Watch. Tom and Judicial Watch playing, I think, one of the most important roles in this country, a great watchdog group, Judicial Watch. Tom, great to have you back with us here on the Great America Show. I'd like to get, first of all, your impressions about where the president stands at this very moment in his persecution by the Biden regime and the deep state.
Yeah, persecution is the right word. And it's kind of like that haze that's over the East Coast from New York to Washington down to Georgia. You had that prosecution by Alvin Bragg, that outrageous indictment. They're planning to do something similar here in Washington, D.C., and then probably next month in Fulton County, Georgia. And so that haze is ruining the country and would ruin the republic. And, you know, I think they're hoping that one of those prosecutions sticks in a way that requires President Trump to campaign from jail. And that's how crazed they are.
And that crazed, that vicious and venal. Why is there not more of, and I know this is a wide open question I'm asking, but why is it the Republican leadership in particular on Capitol Hill cannot bring itself to stand up and demand better for this president, at least show the American people that they have some courage, some level of commitment to the Constitution?
Well, there are many reasons why that isn't happening. You got folks who are concerned about it, but don't have either fear or a failure of imagination to do anything about it within their powers. And then you have another category where they don't care about anything. So, you know, you can't, you know, I mean, we had the Chinese send a spy craft over the middle of the United States doing figure eights over our military base. You know, if we can't get people to be excited about that, you know, an indictment of Trump, you know, that's going to be, you know, that's the political class in a nutshell. They don't care about anything other than their own power. But thirdly, the more dangerous types are, in terms of not just politics, but in terms of our constitutional system, are those who want to see Trump punished, who like this abuse of him. And many of those are Republicans. There are more than a few running against him now, right? And they're going to be happily and gleefully highlighting why Trump, you know, is trouble and you can't rely on him to be president. So, you know, I guess the inverse of that politically seems to be doing pretty good, pretty darn well. But it's going to be a challenge because he isn't getting the support from those who ought to be supporting him. And it's not just Trump. You know, we get, as we were talking before the program began, and, you know, I got subpoenaed before the grand jury. Judicial Watch was harassed. And so it's not just Trump. It's anyone who opposes the deep state, you know, retaliation or an abuse and scare tactics.
We know Jack Smith has a record of ideological fervor, of mad left-wing activism, including putting forth the template, really, for the weaponization of the federal government by being shoulder to shoulder with Lois Lerner and actually going after conservative groups through the Internal Revenue Service and getting away with it. And then projecting to this point in our nation's progress to its destiny, we see the entire federal government weaponized. How can this man be allowed by the Republican Party to be a special counsel to anything pertaining specifically to elections, their leading and presumptive presidential nominee?
Well, you know, I went over some of those reasons. And it's not only Trump. We know he's targeting state legislators from public information, those citizens involved in trying to come up with alternative slates of electors in the 2020 campaign election disputes, investigating the fundraising apparatus of the RNC. It's a Democrat, partisan, leftist fishing expedition being run by these ideologues and the Garland team at the Justice Department and their appointees in the name of Jack Smith. where they're misusing the awful power, and I don't mean awful in a negative sense, but in terms of, full of awe of a federal grand jury to target their political opponents and their political party, and the political party that's their opponent as well. So, and the Republicans are oblivious to it. People on the Hill are largely oblivious to it because they didn't really care about election integrity, so they weren't really involved in the fights, right? Certainly in 2020. But when I'm in front of a grand jury and they're arguing with me, these partisan prosecutors and ideologues, about tweets I sent out about election integrity, there's something seriously wrong with our system.
There's no question there's something seriously wrong, and there is something seriously wrong with the capacity of a federal government and the deep state and the Marxist Dems who've controlled that federal government, irrespective of the Trump presidency, for the past decade. We have a moment right now in history in which they reach out and go after the head of in my opinion, the leading watchdog organization in Washington, D.C., Judicial Watch, which you head. How the temerity to even think about going after you is stunning. Give us a sense of how it came to be, what you think, if you will, triggered the Marxist left.
Well, they were upset that I had highlighted publicly, and it became reported that I told Trump that, their analysis of the records issue is all wrong, that he had a right to have records. And if he turns any over, and after he turned them over, he should at least clarify that the records were his to turn over and he was doing it voluntarily and they're his personal records. And if we want to argue about whether they should become classified or given to the American people for history, that's one thing. But don't accuse me of doing something wrong because these records were mine to keep. And they were angry at me about that because that was the position of the Justice Department prior to them targeting and raiding his home with Bill Clinton's sock drawer records, those tape recordings he had that Judicial Watch had litigated. And so we knew what we were talking about. I mean, we have 30 years experience litigating federal records law. So we were front and center there. And now we had all these lawsuits against them. And then I didn't know this at the time, but they served me with a subpoena in November of last year. But then the Biden records started popping up, right? Then they knew Biden had a records problem,
right?
And of course we were going to be on that, like what, and so what better way to keep me quiet and to intimidate Judicial Watch than to send the FBI to my home and knock on my door? And I just happened to be at home that evening because I literally just come back from a day's worth of skin cancer surgery. And the FBI is hounding me at home over my First Amendment protected speech related to not only the Mar-a-Lago stuff, but also the electoral debates. I mean, it's not like I went in there, Lou, you get called before a grand jury and you think in the back of your mind, okay, well, I'm a witness. I didn't know this is all just retaliation. But you're thinking, well, maybe something happened, right? And I don't know it. But they're going to ask me about it, and I'm going to go, holy shnikes, there was a crime here. What happened? And there was none of that. It was all arguendo, right? Innuendo.
Interesting
and just debates. And, there were maybe 3 or 4 questions where, they want to be sure I didn't see classified information and things like that. Those things I could have told them over the phone. Everything else was just arguing with me about tweets and emails and other things related to policy debates. And I just can't believe that the grand jury process was being for 4 hours. I'm not the only one there. There are 23 poor citizens who were stuck in there with me, listening to me prattle on about these debates we're having.
Although your debate, I presume, was with with FBI agents. Were attorneys present as well?
Oh, so when you go into the grand jury, you don't have an attorney?
No, I was talking about when they came to your home.
Oh, no, that was they just handed me the subpoena. They helpfully pointed out that I had an Amazon package on the porch. But I opened the door. I've got a giant bandage on my face. Really outrageous. And, not to say they knew that I was sick, but, but when you exercise that authority over someone, you interrupt and impact their lives, right? So you need to take responsibility for it. And so if you're going to impact someone's life and by forcing them to go to a grand jury and play games with them, then, my life at that time included skin cancer.
Right.
And as far as I'm concerned, and I was so sick after that surgery. It wasn't because of the surgery. I'm convinced it was because of the stress of getting the subpoena.
Right. I would. No one would in any way blame you for that.
And then, and on top of that, then we get the criminal attorney, right? And then we negotiate. I'm going to go in and just talk to them informally with lawyers, right? My lawyers, and I'm just a witness. And then that gets rescheduled because of issues, right? Nothing. They just couldn't get to it. And next thing you know, they say, oh, no, we want them to come into the grand jury. Completely out of the blue. Never happens. And I'm not I'm a witness.
You're a witness, and we're going to find out more. We're talking with Tom Fitton, the president of Judicial Watch. We're coming right back after this quick pause for these announcements. Stay with us. We're back now with our good friend Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch. Tom was about to go into some of the details of his appearance before a grand jury, having been summoned by the Justice Department. Let's go to that grand jury moment. You've been told that you're just a witness, and is that the way it came out, or were they fishing for an opportunity? Were they looking for some way to ensnare you as well?
Well, you're always sensitive about that because when the proffer session I talked about, you have your attorneys there so they can, help and check the other side if they, start, taking advantage of me as a witness. But that's not the case in a grand jury. I'm in that grand jury room alone with no attorney. Now I can go outside and consult my attorney in a reasonable way, but, I gotta, answer the questions. And, there were a bunch of gotcha questions. But, there was nothing, I was a witness. I didn't see anything. Right. And I told them things they probably didn't want to hear about what they were doing and why they shouldn't have been doing it. But the one troubling, I would call misconduct. I'm still ticked about it. Is that there were three, by the way, not one, not two, but three prosecutors tag teaming me. And the one prosecutor says, well, or do you plan to talk about this testimony, what happened here today publicly to anyone? I said, I don't know. I've got privileged communications. Obviously I can engage in with my attorneys. Yes. But do you plan to talk about this publicly? I said, I don't know. I said, it's out there public. I may have to do something. I don't know. And he asked me a third time. And I said, I don't know. And then he said, Lou, oh, well, by the way, you are allowed to you're allowed to talk about it. And I said to him, I said, well, you know what, frankly, your questions were chilling. And, what am I supposed to make of that? But so this guy was trying to get me to swear under oath before a grand jury that I would not talk, right? Implying that, you're not allowed to. And only after I kind of resisted and, didn't want to bite, 3 times did he say, oh, well, don't worry, you can do it. But what sort of garbage is that coming out of a prosecutor for the federal government in a sensitive grand jury matter involving a former president of the United States? And if that's the crowd that's going after Trump, he's going to be indicted 6 ways to Sunday.
Well, that is I prefer to call them what they are, a gang. They're thugs. They're using the law as battering rams and cudgels to mete out injustice and great harm to the president of the United States when he was president, before he was president, and now post-presidency. the ignorance, the savagery of this Department of Justice is unprecedented, unparalleled, and unthinkable, frankly, in this country. And yet here it is. You've experienced it. Also, Judicial Watch has sued and has been rebuffed by the special counsel for the names of the staff of the special counsel. How can that be?
Well, you know, I know I'm president of Judicial Watch, so I guess I should love Judicial Watch, but that's really why I love Judicial Watch. So they come in, they harass us, right? And what's our response? We sue them for the names of the people working there, because that's what we do in the ordinary course, right? And we're not going to be dissuaded from doing what we ordinarily do. We got the names of the Mueller staffers. That was public. We had gotten like notes showing who was being interviewed. But now they've decided that we can't find out the name of anyone working for Jack Smith under the law, which is highly unusual. There's no legal basis to withhold the information, as best we can tell. And so we've had to sue in federal court. And you know why they're hiding the names, Lou? Because they're all a bunch of partisan Democrats who probably have donations up the wazoo to, you know, the usual suspects, and they don't want the American people to see again what has previously happened.
You mean just like Jack Smith and his wife?
Well, yeah. Well, there you go. I guess that's public. But, you know, we saw with the Mueller operation, it was just full of anti-Trump activists. And then everyone he hired happened to be a Democrat donor. Well, I think there was one who had given to Republicans too.
Unbelievable.
But the point is, the exception proved the rule there. And they didn't want that again, right? And so now they're going to break the FOIA law and hide the records. The most significant special counsel investigation right now, we can't find out who the top people are in it. That's not right.
So when is there an assertion by so-called nonpartisans in this country in positions of leadership, business, education, academia, science, you name the sector, to say this is not the way America behaves. This is not the way a president of the United States is treated. Almost 8 years of political persecution without any evidence of wrongdoing whatsoever. In fact, all that has been amassed in that time are truckloads of documents showing that the federal government is politically corrupt. The Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Internal Revenue Service, the Department of Homeland Security, and the list goes on and on. And did I mention the entire intelligence community?
Yeah, it's a real crisis we have with both partisans and civil servants who pretend not to be partisan in the administrative agencies. And of course, our cultural elites are all to the left, who don't care about this abuse of power and this disrespect for our constitutional government. You know, the president has a right to be president when he's president, right? And he's allowed to exercise his powers. That wasn't true for Trump. And the same goes for former presidents. If former presidents are held to the rules that, you know, Trump is being held to now, which are new rules made up out of whole cloth, you know, who's going to want to be president? I'm sure other than leftists who know they'll be protected. So this is a way to disrupt our whole system of government. And it's not petty politics because the consequences are much greater than that.
I believe we're at the point where there are only two options, frankly. One is that the Republican representatives and senators stand up and demand better treatment for this president. In fact, and much better conduct from the Department of Justice, and basically say to the White House, this will not stand, and we demand that you cease and desist now. I'm not talking about as a legal order. I'm talking about as a moral and ethical and American order to this president and this corrupt regime that he has brought with him, and the deep state. The corrupt bureaucrats of every department in the federal government, or one court, just one in the corrupt federal judiciary, stands up and says this will not stand. What are the prospects, in your judgment, of either of those two things happening?
Well, I've been begging the leadership of Congress to do the first, and that hasn't happened. And I suggested it be done as part of the debt deal. They didn't want to do it. I'm not seeing any sign they're going to do it in any of the appropriations process now that's underway. So that's unlikely. I'm absent, a public outrage that Congress understands because they're told about it because citizens are calling. Now, this indictment by Trump that I think is coming, it could be there's a federal court that says no, that at least on the issue of the document handling and whether he had the right to the documents, that then gets thrown out. That would not be unsurprising given our understanding of the law. But that would require a tough judge, an honest judge, an ethical judge, and they're there. But there's significant political pressure. I mean, we've had a lot of good judges. We have a few good judges here in Washington, D.C. But when it comes to January 6th issues, for instance, they're completely all really out there, right? And none of them, few of them have been, consistently good.
And when you're talking about a district court and a brave judge, you're talking about making a summary judgment from what would be the inception of the legal process, aren't you? Because there isn't time for it. There's a time for a court. The president had a right to. You can't prosecute him under this theory of the law related to the handling of documents. Yeah. Now, if there's an obstruction charge, does that mean that gets carried away too? I don't know. You'll have to talk to some smart lawyers about that. But certainly, I'll forego the pleasure.
Yeah, but certainly, what's good. The good news is their focus on now supposedly defense information, right? The kind of the broader language than classified information suggests they know we're right about the president's prerogatives in handling classified information. Of course, the dishonesty is it applies to defense information. The dishonesty is that the Presidential Records Act, which gives the president's prerogatives and really just codifies his powers under the Constitution, subsumes or over, the defense documents are subsumed within that. So he has absolute right to use the documents he gets as president and keep them. And they don't want to grapple with that. They're trying to create a crime out of that. And it's never been done before. And the law doesn't allow it. And the Constitution won't allow it. The question is, will the court vindicate the rule of law there, or will they sign on to this effort to make Donald J. Trump a political prisoner?
He also has been attached to a sinecure by the appointment of, again, Attorney General Merrick Garland at The Hague as a prosecutor. He's not a particularly clever boy. I mean, that's the bottom line. He dresses up in purple and black robes over there pretty nicely, but the result has been, as I said, checkered. We're talking with Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch. We're coming right back. Stay with us. We're back with Judicial Watch's Tom Fitton. And Tom, I want to turn first to another aspect of the D.C. judiciary, and that is whether or not, with the Trump lawyers accusing the special counsel of prosecutorial misconduct, do they have a chance of winning on that basis?
Oh, that's a good question. So the allegation is that they tried to get a witness to cooperate by offering the lawyer a federal judgeship. Is that your understanding of it?
Well, I don't really have an understanding of it. There are so many areas here at work, including the way in which they have talked to witnesses, in much like your own case, in which they're trying to lead them, badger them, intimidate them before the grand jury.
So evidently, something like that happened, right? I may be off by a detail or two, but that's my general impression of it. And that would be before the judge that handles the grand jury, the chief judge here in the district, is Judge Boasberg, who's an Obama appointee.
Right.
Whether that misconduct would result in the whole case being thrown out, I don't know. I mean, assuming it had happened, I don't know. It depends who did it, right? So if it was an attorney that wasn't in a position to make decisions or impact the investigation, maybe their thinking is he can be walled off and the investigation can continue. Remember, that's how they did it with Mueller, right? When they caught these guys engaging in misconduct, what did they do? They hid it from the American people.
Right.
And then admitted later that they got rid of them and just continued doing what they were doing against Trump. I suspect that's going to be, if indeed something went wrong, the outcome here.
Well, I would not bet a lot of money on the integrity of Boasberg, given his background. I will hold out hope, but it's hope against the awareness of experience. The D.C. courts, you say, have some good judges. I say that I have seen very little in the way of impartiality on the part of what is, to me, a den of left-wing partisans on the bench there. Yeah. Well, and a federal judiciary, frankly, that is, to me, broadly speaking, and with some exceptions, it's corrupt. Let's just be straight. I mean, how are you going to get a fair trial in this country in this day and age? And I'm talking about whether you're in the state court system or a federal court system.
Yeah, I don't see, a trial going well for Trump no matter what here. And the judges here don't really care much about Trump or for Trump, and that includes Republican appointees. So he's gotten a raw deal on virtually every issue here, including he's had all of his privileges torn apart, and the Biden administration's helped that along. It's been awful for the Republic. It's been awful, and it's not about Trump. I like Trump personally, but it's not about that. It's about whether the rule of law is going to prevail and apply. I see, Menendez, for instance, is now, did you see Senator Menendez is now in the sights of the Justice Department?
Right.
Again. And, I don't admire Senator Menendez. I probably, my guess is he's probably not someone, I would trust to invest with any money. But who I trust less is the Justice Department.
Yep.
And so it's not about Trump. It's like, I don't trust this Justice Department to investigate a jaywalking claim involving a politician. I really don't.
Well, Tom, to tell you the truth, when I saw that Menendez was under investigation by the Justice Department, I thought, what is the political motivation for that? And what do they have in mind as a replacement for Menendez? There had to be some ideological and power interested purpose or objective, because they didn't just suddenly find a senator they wanted to go after because he had violated the law.
Well, Menendez is, he's a reliable leftist generally, but on some foreign policy issues, he can be a kind of a stick in the mud for the left. He's no friend of the communists in Cuba, for instance, and they don't like him for that. So they're happy, they're happy to let proceedings go against him. And in the case of this current Justice Department investigation, it looks like it's a stretch, just like other investigations of Republicans have been. So my point is, it's not partisan, the concern. The concern is these agencies operate outside the law too often when it comes to politically sensitive investigations. And the rules, if powerful officials don't get the benefit of the rule of law, what about the regular Joe?
Yeah, we know the answer to that.
Caught up.
But what I consider the great issue here is, with all of the obvious, blatant, in-our-face corruption on the part of the regime, the Biden regime, the Marxist Dems, the deep state, the permanent bureaucracy, the uniparty, if one prefers, I don't see any recourse. I see no way in which the American people can respond to perfidy, to savagery. Through the legal system. It's under the control of the Marxist left, the judiciary, that is. The federal government is under the control of them. What in the world are the rest of us to do? And are there enough of us to do it?
Well, to come back around to the other part of our discussion, we certainly need better leadership from Congress. And if listeners are concerned about it, they need to let their congressmen know that the FBI and the DOJ, they only operate. There's not a dollar they spend without the permission of Congress. So every abuse that we're talking about is fully funded by Congress. Despite all the noise you hear about investigations, they give them money, and there's been no restrictions on the money. There's been no effort, for instance, to defund Jack Smith or cut off federal funding for jurisdictions that don't protect the civil rights as Americans, like New York isn't and like Fulton County isn't. That sort of creative effort to kind of at least keep the feds and our tax dollars away from that corruption. If the Justice Department doesn't want to protect the rule of law, then the Congress can. So there are ways to do it. And so don't let anyone, and this is why I know you're frustrated, because there are ways to do it. And it's not that hard. It just requires a bit of will and leadership.
And to this point, no one has shown more will and leadership and courage than Congressman Jim Jordan, Congressman James Comer. I would call them the Brave 20, the Freedom Caucus, standing up, and a handful of others. But right now, Congressman Comer has canceled the vote to hold Chris Wray, the director of the FBI, in contempt because, ostensibly, there was an agreement with the FBI to let all members of oversight see a document, and the ranking member and the chairman of the committee to see two other ancillary documents, which are footnotes, as they're called, pertaining to references in that original document. 1023, FBI document 1023.
Yeah, the smoking gun.
Your reaction to it, is this enough? Is this a conclusion that you support?
I don't know. I mean, I don't have the document yet, so I don't see how they get the document. Do you see how they get the document based on what you've read? I guess I'm looking for, Grassley wants to release the document. He can't yet because it's not been turned over to him directly by the Justice Department or the FBI, which are one and the same here.
But it's not classified. It's not classified.
It's not classified. And it's information that's damaging to Biden, and they don't want the public to see it. And I'm not seeing how this route gives the information to the public. That's why when it becomes ripe, and meaning from the process that we've initiated, we're almost certain to sue to try to get the record.
Well, we hope you do so soon. Godspeed as usual, Judicial Watch, because we have to turn to you way too often to do the Lord's work and honor the public's right to know in this country. There was a time when the public was more interested in their right to know and more assertive of that right. I hope that that day is returning. I don't see it, but I'm hoping. Right now, all I see is that the Constitution, this republic, our political leaders, particularly the leaders of the Republican Party, are tremulous in the face of outright corruption and an organization called the Democrat Party that is really led by Marxist Dems and mean to great harm to this republic. Tom, as always, we thank you for all of your work and that of Judicial Watch in trying to preserve those rights and this republic. We always give our guests the last word. And Tom, if you will, your concluding remarks.
Well, we're facing a crisis with the indictments of Trump, and I would encourage all of your listeners to, to the degree they are concerned, share those concerns with members of Congress, because things won't change unless Congress fears the public opinion and being voted out of office if they don't do the right thing. It's difficult to overstate how important it is to communicate with your members of Congress. And of course, supporting Judicial Watch, because, for all of my desire to have Congress do the right thing, we don't rely on them to do the right thing. And that's where we come in. And so people can go to judicialwatch.org and support our work,
which we encourage everyone to do. Tom, great to have you with us. And I want to just ask you, after your health, you're feeling well and everything is good?
Yeah, I think they got it all. So knock on wood, it doesn't come back. But, with skin cancer, you just have to keep on monitoring it. So I'm like many millions of other Americans, kind of stuck having to make sure it doesn't come back.
Well, I'm of an age, as they say, where I do the same thing. So, it's a very big club. Unfortunately, millions and millions of Americans. We're delighted that you're in great shape and that you've, we'll encourage everyone. Don't wait. If you think there's something that a doctor should see, head off to the doctor straight away. Those dermatologists are amazing, amazing doctors, as are all physicians.
That's good advice. That is good advice.
Well, we appreciate you being with us, Tom. Thanks so much, and look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you.